Hi, and welcome to the Business Spotlight Series. My name is Mark McNulty with Action Coach Bluegrass, and today I have with me Andre Regard, who is the founder of Regard Law Group. So welcome, Andre.
Thanks for having me here this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking to Andre about his journey to business ownership and business challenges, best practices, what it's like to own a law practice, and some lessons for business owners as well that we're going to work in there. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to like and subscribe so you get notifications when our next interviews get dropped. So, Andre, welcome. Thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about Regard Law Group.
Sure. So Regard Law Group is based in Lexington, Kentucky, and our specialized area of practice, we really can't say in Kentucky we have a specialty, but we're a business law firm in the sense that we help business owners set up their businesses and also manage their businesses from a legal point of view. And a big part of our practice is business litigation, where we help business owners who are involved in disputes to resolve those disputes. And we do a lot of that on a contingency basis as well.
Okay. So what's the size of your team right now?
We currently have 3 paralegals and a couple of associate attorneys. I also use a lot of contract attorneys that specialize in certain areas. You know, as a litigator, our specialty is knowing how the court system works and how to best present a client's case. So sometimes I'll use contract lawyers to help us in specific areas of the law or specific cases.
Okay, great. So what led you to start your own practice versus, going corporate?
That's a great question. When I first started practicing, I was in Washington, D.C. I had gone to Georgetown University, undergrad and law school, and in there was also in the United States Navy as a procurement officer. So I always had an interest in business. My undergraduate was accounting. I got my CPA. I was basically a contracts officer in the Navy. So I was living in Washington, D.C. and moved to Kentucky with my family. My wife was involved in the horse business, and I started practicing here. And actually, for 10 years, I didn't practice. I was just involved in the horse business. When I say the horse business, I mean the thoroughbred industry. And in 2009, I decided to refocus on law. And at that point, I was an entrepreneur and I wanted my own practice. I really didn't want to work for somebody else. So I decided to set up my own business.
Okay. So you're actually involved in multiple businesses. You're one of those entrepreneurs that happens to be a lawyer, right?
That's pretty fair. I run a law practice where I do business litigation and business transactional work, and we do some personal injury. But I also run a real estate investment company, and I own a bourbon company, and I'm still involved in the horse industry to a certain extent.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about your business. So business law, when I talk to business owners, the first thing that sounds expensive.
Yeah.
All right. So take a minute to kind of educate our listeners a little bit on why it's more expensive to not have a great business attorney.
Well, what you said is correct. Most people say, well, I don't need to hire a lawyer. I'm a business person. I can read a contract. I know what I'm doing. The reality is, usually when people come in my office, it's one of two things. Either it's somebody on the front side of a transaction where they're saying, look, I'm going to do a transaction. I want a lawyer to review the documents or help me set up my company, organize my company properly, review my operating agreement. And there's certainly a cost associated with that. And, that might be $2,000 or $3,000. If it's more complicated, it could be $10,000. But let's say it's a couple of $1,000s to review an agreement. That's well spent money, because the other thing that happens is somebody walks in my office and they say, a dispute's arisen with my partner, a dispute's arisen with my contractor, my landlord, and then they pull out this lease or they pull out an operating agreement, and I review it and I just can't believe what they signed, or the fact that they had no advice. And the problem at that point is you're in a dispute, and disputes are always going to cost a whole lot more than taking care of the work on the front side. So that little bit of interaction with an attorney at the beginning of your transaction, whether it's the establishment of your business and how do we set up the business, or how do we set up an operating agreement appropriately, or how do we do a construction contract or a lease, and sitting down and making sure that your interests are protected. What I like to tell people is commercial landlords are in the business of renting property. People who rent from them are really not in the business of renting property. They're in the business of doing something else, running a jewelry store, having a car dealership, having a restaurant. So the person who drafts the agreement's always going to have the advantage. So that's where a lawyer comes in, and that the lawyer reviews documents on a regular basis. And you need to sit down with your attorney and say, these are my objectives and goals, and this is where my risk tolerance is. And then that lawyer can help protect you and point out to you what you may not see because you're just simply not experienced enough at it. It also allows the client to focus on what it is that they do. You know, if you're a restaurant owner, a bar owner, or you have a massage therapy location, that's what you do. You're not in the business of contracts. So let a lawyer who is specialized do that for you.
I always tell clients when they ask about it, it's like, well, you can either pay some up front now or pay later. And the pay later typically has an extra zero on the end of the bill.
Yeah, well, that's correct. The pay later is really expensive. I mean, the number of partnerships or LLCs that are out there where they don't have an operating agreement or they had somebody else draft the operating agreement. Let's say you're going to partner with somebody, and I'm using that word loosely. Most LLCs people think of as partnerships. You still should have your own attorney review it just to put protections in there. All the time I see documents that I scratch my head and say, boy, it would have been a lot better for you if you had an attorney review this sooner. Also, when disputes happen, a lot of people wait too long to contact an attorney. Often you can contact the attorney that can stop the process from getting worse. You know, make sure that you're doing proper notifications, make sure that you're doing a risk analysis of where this is going, even if you don't act. Just come and sit down for an hour or two. You know, you're going to pay an hourly rate, maybe, maybe not, and have a conversation about what you're trying to do so that you can game out what's going to happen with somebody who deals with disputes every day. That's the difference. The difference is an attorney deals with disputes every day, and we also understand how disputes get resolved both judicially and outside of the court system. You don't want to go to court if you can avoid it, because going to court is extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm. So talking like mediation there?
Well, mediation or just resolution, lawyer to lawyer or lawyer to the other side. You know, Abraham Lincoln, I'm going to paraphrase what he said, but he said a good lawyer is a lawyer that helps his client stay out of court. Because, you know, what court is, you know, we all watch dramas about lawyers, and what you see about lawyers is always courtroom work. You never see what happens behind the scenes and the transactional work and the discovery. But going to court is a very, very expensive process, and it's very, very distracting. When you're trying to run a business and you're in litigation or in disputes, it takes your attention and focus away from what you're doing and what you do best, and you're distracted now. So that's another place where the lawyer comes in, as the lawyer helps to take some of that mental energy and refocus it so you can do what you do best.
And I like that, you know, what you said at the start that really just struck me as, and I got to go tell all my clients this one, you know, it's the landlord is in the business of renting property. The business owner is not.
Correct.
And it's one of those.
And it's also true. I mean, a big example are construction contracts and actually real estate as well. I don't do a lot of personal consumer family real estate, but think about this for a moment. A person goes to buy a house. It's one of the only times they're ever going to do it in their entire life. And they're going to sign a contract for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. And they don't hire a lawyer and spend $500 to have it reviewed to make sure their interests are protected if they need to get out of that contract. And construction contracts is also a really big deal, whether it's a consumer, a family constructing a home, or a business doing a fit up or a new construction. Once again, the construction companies are in the business of producing contracts. They deal with contracts all the time as it relates to construction. It shocks me what types of contracts the user, the consumer, will agree to with construction companies. I mean, no protections at all. You have to assume every lease that's given to you, if you're the tenant, is going to have no protections in it for you at all. Right? It's all about the landlord. And there's things you can push back. You know, how do you terminate it? What are damages? What happens if there is a condemnation? A lot of people don't even think about that, but it happens. How those costs get allocated. What happens if the landlord does something that stops the utilities or the roof leaks? I mean, all these types of issues that can affect your business. If you're in a shopping center, security in the shopping center and how that affects your business and the liabilities that may get created. So those are issues that you're not thinking of as a business owner because you're just simply not familiar with them.
Mm-hmm. So what would you summarize that, business owners, these are the top 5 things that you should absolutely always get professional legal advice on?
Well, one, when you're setting up your business, if it's anything other than a sole proprietorship, so anything that involves another person or persons, you need to get somebody who can review those documents for you, and you need to have documents. If you're going to have a business, I also, everybody has to have a register. If you have an incorporated business, whether it's an LLC, which is the most common type, or a regular C Corp, you have to have a registered agent. And most people don't think much about that. They don't even really understand what it is. I think you should have a lawyer as your registered agent. And a service that we provide and that businesses ought to think of is if you're going to have an incorporated business, the reason you do it is for risk management. You're trying to protect your personal assets from your business transactions. Well, if you're going to do that, then you have to run your business like a business. And one of the key things there's 3 main things you need to do with that. One, you need to make sure all of your checking accounts are separate. So you need to make sure that when you're running your business, you're not intermingling your funds. That's probably the number one thing. The second thing is you have to run your business like a business. And part of that is you should have an annual meeting. You should do resolutions. And it sounds kind of nonsensical if it's just you and one other person, or even if it's just you and it's a single member LLC. Because what happens is if you ever get sued, the first thing the defendant's going to do is they're going to say, well, how am I going to get paid in this case? And can I pierce the corporate veil? And when they go to pierce the corporate veil, they're going to say, I want to see your financials. I want to see your checkbook, and I want to see your corporate records. And boy, if you can produce a binder that says, here's my operating agreement and here's my annual meeting, even if the meeting just says, we sat down and reviewed the prior year and, we agree to keep the same officers, just something that shows that you're running your business as a business makes a tremendous amount of difference when you're being faced with a challenge to the corporate veil. But another thing that happens there with my clients that I am the registered agent with, who take advantage of what we call kind of corporate secretary services, is it gives us a chance to sit down with them once a year. And we organize the meeting. And basically we say, look, Acme Inc., we're going to have your annual meeting next Wednesday. We're going to do it by Zoom, or we're going to do it in your office. And before I do it, I say, hey, look, here's a list of things I need to know. Who's your current landlord? Who's your current insurance agent? Who's your current banker? A couple of other questions that usually are specific to their business. And we do take that as a chance to basically do a physical of the business. It doesn't have to be long, but an opportunity for the business owner to think for a moment, all right, has anything changed where I need to change my liability insurances? Have I started a new line of business? What's going on with my landlord? When is my lease going to expire? Did I give them proper notification? Because if you miss your notification, your lease may get jacked up because you didn't do a 180-day notification. So it's an opportunity to use your registered agent as somebody who helps to check on the health of your business. And I think a lawyer, as the registered agent, can certainly do that for you.
Okay, great. So we talked about, so you're kind of that serial entrepreneur. I've got a client who's a CPA, who's another one, she's an entrepreneur. She's had multiple businesses and just happens to be a CPA, but she's really a serial entrepreneur. So what are some lessons that you've learned outside of the law as an entrepreneur that other entrepreneurs, business owners could learn from, right? What are some things you've learned in the process that you could share?
Sure. Well, one, it's never going to go the way you think it's going to go. So you better be ready every day for something new. It's a lot of work being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. You're the first person in the office, the last person that leaves, the last person that gets paid, the person who has all the stress. I mean, often I think to myself as a lawyer, it'd be a lot easier to go work for somebody else. But you have so many satisfactions in that, when you do achieve something, that you did it. But I think some general advice that I would give is one, have a business plan, have objectives, review those objectives, have a 1, 3, and 5 year plan, have some short-term objectives, be reasonable. The reality is when you go into business for yourself, most businesses fail. So your goal should be to stay open, to provide a service that's needed, to be satisfied by what you're doing. But you have to go into the business with open eyes that it's going to be challenging. That's why most people don't start their own businesses. The next thing would be it's all about your team. It's all about the people who work for you. A good employee or a good vendor is the difference between success and failure. And I also believe that most businesses, you can find mentors in various parts of the business. Somebody's done it before. People want to talk about and share their experiences. Go and find people that have done it before and ask them. Very rarely is somebody going to refuse to speak to you. People want to share their experiences. They want to share their successes, and they usually want to share their failures also. I think in today's world, the use of technology is really important. I mean, we have the ability to have the word virtual assistant is used a lot. That really doesn't mean what I think most people think it means. It just means remote, but using remote vendors and remote employees is something you should take advantage of in today's world. There's a lot of talent you can get that doesn't have to be down the street. So, just be open-minded about the technology that's out there and how that can help benefit your business. I think is also very important.
What's a memorable, unexpected challenge or roadblock that you could, maybe share a little bit about that you experienced and what you had to do to overcome it?
Sure. Well, I mentioned earlier, I've not only done law, but I've also been involved in real estate, commercial real estate, and also in the thoroughbred industry. So, I'm going to talk about failure, challenges, or obstacles, I guess. Obviously in 2008, when they had 2008, 2009 financial crisis, I mean, that was literally a situation where in the thoroughbred business I was involved in at the time, we had the best year we had ever had the year before, and then immediately everything just fell out. And I think what I learned in that is that obstacles, no matter how large they are and how difficult they seem, you're going to get through them. And, you just need to pull back and just analyze what's happening and figure out a pathway ahead. And that pathway may not be your business pulling through. So I think, people need to be mindful that their family and their health and their integrity are really the most important things. And if you can keep a focus on that and try to figure out a pathway ahead, and sometimes there is no pathway ahead. A book I recently read or did audiobook on was a book by Ann Duke called Quit. Because in society, all we learn about is grit. You just push through it. You're going to make it. You're going to get to the top of the mountain. I think something I've learned both in business and in law is just knowing when to quit. And it's not a bad thing. It's an analysis of what are my skills and what are my resources and where's the best place for me to apply my resources and skills. And maybe I need to change that. Maybe I need to do something different than what I am doing. And it's a great book. It's called Quit. And it really analyzes when an opportunity needs to change and when you need to shift gears. Because sometimes I think people stick with things too long. I think there's a place for grit. There's also a place for analyzing application of resources. We all have limited resources, whether it's time or money or bandwidth, and you need to apply. I think one of the biggest things, because I've been involved in a couple of other businesses, I also have a consumer B2B gifting business that I'm involved in and have been for many years. And I think as business owners, what we tend to do is we tend to have clients and we get worried. So we try to offer more services to our clients. We think I've already acquired a client. So why don't I just offer that client some new service and then some new service? I think personally that it's better to be focused on a smaller number of services or products and actually acquire more clients, because while client acquisition is very expensive, adding new SKUs or new services that are outside the scope of what you already know have a tremendous cost that you don't realize. And that cost is distraction. It's a distraction to what you already do best. And you say, well, now I'm going to offer, I already do A, B, and C, so now I'm going to do D. Well, you just added a whole nother thing to the table that now you have to learn it. And it's going to distract from what you already do best. So I used to always want to offer more. I can do anything. I can do whatever you want me to do. I can do whatever products you need, whatever service you need. And as I've gotten older, I've realized I can't do it all. And there are certain things I do very well, whether it's a legal service I provide or something I do in my bourbon business or in my real estate business. I can't offer every type of real estate, but I can do light industrial really well. So I don't need to be into medical space or home building. It's not what I do. So I would say, focusing on what you do and what you do well is probably the best thing to do.
Okay. All right. So awesome. This has been great and a lot of great advice for business owners from a legal perspective and then just from the entrepreneur's perspective. So a couple of quick questions to wrap us up here. And you kind of, gave the long answer to a couple of these. So kind of what's the short, quick answer? Number one is, what's your key to success?
I think it's integrity. Just following through on what you tell people you're going to do is what I've prided myself in, and being responsive to what my customers want, irrespective of whether it's a tenant in a real estate transaction or a legal client. Is, if your client calls you and you can't take care of it, it doesn't mean you can't call them and say, look, I can't do this for the next 48 hours. And if you need it done right now, I can give you a couple of names. I just simply can't do it right now. You have to be realistic. I think people try to do everything all the time, and that gets them into trouble.
Okay. Don't overpromise and underdeliver.
Always underpromise and overdeliver. Yes.
Okay. What's one piece of advice you have for business owners?
Have a plan. The plan's going to change, but have a plan. Write it on a whiteboard. You can erase it and change it, but have some sort of outline of what you're going to do, and get good advisors around you so you can focus on the skills that you have, which is whatever product you're selling or service that you're selling.
Okay. Awesome. So you mentioned the book Quit, and I'm going to add that to my reading list on Audible or listening list. Any other books that you'd recommend for an entrepreneur?
I'm not great at book names. Quit was a great book. There was a book I was reading recently called Be a Unicorn. And I think that's a really good book, really kind of saying, do what you do and do what you do better than anybody else does it. The whole idea of singular focus. I think that is an excellent book as well.
All right. And then second and last question. So if you had to choose one area of your practice to improve from a business perspective, what would that be?
I would say it's my business litigation practice. I mean, I really like helping business owners that are in disputes, particularly the business owner who's been shut out of the business. Because I have an entrepreneurial background, I sort of empathize with them. Because I have an accounting background and a legal background, I often can look at the problem and do a pretty good analysis of it. And I just find it's really rewarding, because those business owners that are on the backside of the deal are desperate. They're scared. It's what they've put all of their effort and focus on. And to be able to help those business owners come out at the end of the day with either their businesses or some of their money back is pretty rewarding to me. And it's something I enjoy focusing on.
Okay. So if people want to learn more about you and your law practice, how would they find you and contact you? Is your website the best way to do that?
Yeah, or they can just call me on my cell phone. I answer my cell phone all the time. 859-533-0781. If you have any listeners who just want to chat about whatever situation they're in, or just kind of spitball a little bit, I'm happy to sit down and talk with them. I love learning about businesses. I think what makes a good lawyer is somebody who's inquisitive and somebody who wants to learn. I love just learning what people are doing, and I get very excited and passionate about trying to help them.
Awesome. Great. All right. So thank you. So last question for today. What inspires you the most right now?
My kids inspire me. I have 4 adult children. One's a lawyer, one's a programmer, one's in the horse business, and my daughter is about to finish up as a structural engineer. And I get inspired by them every day on what they're doing and how they're approaching the world. So that's my current inspiration.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. That's great. I love family. I hear that from at least half of the owners in terms of their family being just a big inspiration to them. So that's great. So, listeners, this has been Andre Regard with Regard Law Group, and he's our serial entrepreneur that happens to be a great business attorney. A lot of lessons from Andre here, a lot of wisdom in ways to save yourself stress, time, and most importantly, money by utilizing the business attorney for your business for the right things. Because when things go wrong, it always costs more, and you just add a zero on the end of the price tag. The ounce of prevention really pays off. So make sure you listen to this. Go ahead and bookmark it and subscribe so you get notifications on all the future interviews. Thanks for listening. Andre, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you on the next interview.